The recruitment office in downtown Phoenix buzzed with the usual mix of nervous energy and desperate hope. I sat in a plastic chair that had seen better decades, my feet barely touching the linoleum floor, watching hulking men twice my size stride past with the confidence of people who belonged. My hands rested in my lap, small, delicate things that my grandmother used to call piano fingers before she realized I had no musical talent whatsoever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Vasquez? The sergeant's voice cut through my anxiety like a blade. I stood up, all 5 feet and 2 inches of me, and followed him into a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and broken dreams. Staff Sergeant Morrison was exactly what Central Casting would order for a military recruiter: square jaw, buzzcut, shoulders that could support a small aircraft. He glanced at my file, then at me, then back at the file with the expression of a man trying to solve a particularly frustrating puzzle. Says here you want to be a sniper. Yes, sir. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked in protest. Miss Vasquez, I'm going to be straight with you. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper Program is the most demanding military occupation specialty we offer. The dropout rate is 87%. Most of the guys who make it are built like linebackers and have been hunting since they could walk. I kept my expression neutral, though inside, my stomach was performing gymnastics routines I didn't know were possible. I understand, sir. Do you? He picked up a Penn Standard government issue, black ink, and tapped it against my file. You're 22 years old. You weigh what? Maybe 110 pounds soaking wet. Your hands. He gestured vaguely at my lap. Well, they're not exactly what we typically see in candidates. The comment about my hands hit exactly where it was supposed to. I'd heard variations of it my entire life. Too small to play volleyball in high school. Too delicate to work construction with my father's crew. Too feminine to be taken seriously in the automotive program at Phoenix Community College. Everyone had an opinion about what my hands could and couldn't do. Sir, respectfully, I believe my qualifications speak for themselves. I slid a folder across his desk. Perfect scores on the ASVAB, expert marksman rating from the Civilian Shooting Club. Physical fitness scores in the top percentile for my age group. Morrison flipped through the documents, his expression shifting slightly. Where'd you learn to shoot? My grandfather taught me. Every weekend from age 8 until he passed when I was 16. What did he do? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vietnam War, Marine Corps, First Force Reconnaissance Company. The pen stopped tapping. Morrison looked up sharply. Abuelo Vasquez was your grandfather? I blinked, surprised. You knew him? Knew of him? His reputation was legendary when I was coming up through the ranks. They still tell stories about some of his shots in advanced marksmanship training. Morrison set my file down carefully. That changes things, maybe. Hope flickered in my chest like a candle in a drafty room. Sir, I'm still not convinced you have what it takes physically. The mental aspect, maybe if you're anything like your grandfather. But Scout Sniper School will break you in ways you can't imagine. The instructors will look at you and see weakness. They'll push harder than they push the men, just to prove a point. What point would that be, sir? That women don't belong in combat roles. That small hands can't steady a rifle. That you're taking up a spot that should go to a real warrior. His voice carried the weight of institutional skepticism, even as his eyes showed something that might have been respect. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the last 3 years of my life. After Grandpa died, I drifted through a series of dead-end jobs, trying to figure out where I fit. Auto mechanic shop where the guys treated me like a mascot. Retail jobs where managers assumed I was temporary. Even at the shooting club where I consistently outperformed most members, there were always whispered comments about beginner's luck or easy targets. "I've been preparing for that my whole life, sir." Morrison studied me for a long moment. "Your grandfather ever tell you about the impossible shot?" My heart skipped. "The one in the Mekong Delta? The shot that saved his entire squad?" "That's the one. 1,200 meters, crosswind, moving target, brass breathing down his neck telling him it couldn't be done." Morrison's voice dropped to something approaching reverence. "He made that shot with a rifle that was falling apart and hands that were shaking from malaria fever." Know what he told his commanding officer afterward? I shook my head, though I suspected I knew the story. He said, "Sir, it's not the size of the hands that matters. It's the steadiness of the heart behind them." The silence in the room stretched between us like a taut wire. I could hear the air conditioning cycling on, the distant sound of traffic on Central Avenue, the rustle of papers from the outer office. Morrison was testing me, I realized. This was part of the evaluation process. "I'm not my grandfather," I said finally, "but I learned everything he could teach me. And I'm willing to learn everything the Corps can teach me." Morrison nodded slowly. "The next Scout Sniper class starts in 6 weeks. Basic training first, then advanced individual training, then the sniper course itself. Assuming you make it through each phase, you're looking at almost 2 years before you're fully qualified." He pulled out a stack of forms. "Still interested?" "Yes, sir." "Then let's get started." As I filled out paperwork, Morrison made a phone call. I caught fragments of his conversation. Unusual candidate. Vasquez single quotes as granddaughter. Worth taking a chance on. When he hung up, he was smiling, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. I just got off the phone with Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Chun. She's one of the senior instructors at the Scout Sniper School. Happens to be one of the first women to complete the program herself, about 5 years ago. "There are women in the program?" "Not many. Chun's one of maybe a dozen who've made it through in the past decade. But she's got a reputation for being harder on female candidates than the male instructors are. If you're looking for special treatment or sisterhood solidarity, you won't find it with her." I thought about that as I signed form after form. The idea of facing extra scrutiny from someone who'd walked the same path was both terrifying and oddly comforting. At least she'd know what I was up against. "One more thing," Morrison said as he collected my paperwork. "Chun asked me to give you some advice. She said to tell you that in her experience, the candidates who make it aren't necessarily the ones who start strongest. They're the ones who refuse to quit when everyone expects them to." "Did she say anything else?" Morrison's smile became almost paternal. "She said if you're half the Marine your grandfather was, the Corps is lucky to have you. But if you're twice the Marine he was, God help the enemy." I left the recruitment office with a ship date, a thick packet of preparatory materials, and a knot of anxiety in my stomach that felt roughly the size of Arizona. 6 weeks to get ready for the biggest challenge of my life. 6 weeks to prove that small hands could hold steady when everything depended on it. That night I drove out to the cemetery where Grandpa was buried. His headstone was simple. Manuel Vasquez, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, 1943 to 2018, Semper Fidelis. I sat cross-legged in the grass beside his grave and told him about my gay. "I know you can't hear me," I said to the granite marker. "But I could use some of that Vasquez steadiness right about now. Everyone thinks I'm crazy for trying this. Maybe I am." The desert wind rustled through the olive trees planted throughout the cemetery. In that sound, I almost thought I could hear his voice. "Mia, crazy and brave, look exactly the same from the outside. The difference is in the heart." I stayed until the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have made any sniper appreciate the beauty of a clear sight picture. Then I drove home to start preparing for the fight of my life. The next 6 weeks blurred together in a haze of physical training, studying military regulations and mental preparation. I ran every morning at 5 a.m., lifted weights at a gym where the regulars had stopped staring at the tiny woman deadlifting twice her body weight. I practiced my shooting at the club range until the staff joked about charging me rent on Lane 7. But it was the evenings that mattered most. That's when I'd spread out my grandfather's military photographs on my kitchen table and study them like holy texts. Pictures of him in Vietnam, looking impossibly young in his utilities. Group shots with his squad, his face serious but his eyes alive with purpose. And one photo in particular that I kept separate from the others, a grainy black and white image of him behind a rifle. His small friend. He'd given it to me on my 16th birthday, 3 months before he died. At the time, I thought it was just a nice gesture from a grandfather who was proud of his granddaughter's shooting hobby. Now I understood it was something much more important, a blueprint for the person I was supposed to become. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening while I was cleaning my rifle, a ritual that had become as routine as brushing my teeth. Morrison's voice was crisp and professional. "Vasquez, your ship date got moved up. There's been a spot that opened in the current class. You leave for Paris Island this Friday." My hand stilled on the cleaning rod. This Friday? That's 4 days from now. I know it's short notice, but Chun specifically requested you for this cycle. Apparently, she's been following your preparation through the shooting club. Your scores have been impressive. She's been watching me. Elena, from the moment you walked out of my office, you became her project. She's invested in your success. Morrison's voice softened slightly. Don't let her down. More importantly, don't let yourself down. After I hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by everything I was about to leave behind. My apartment was small but comfortable, a converted garage behind a larger house, decorated with thrift store furniture and my grandfather's military memorabilia. In 4 days, I'd trade this quiet space for the organized chaos of basic training. I picked up the phone and called my parents. "Mia, are you sure about this?" My mother's voice carried the weight of every worry she'd harbored since I announced my decision. "It's not too late to change your mind." "I'm sure, Mama. But why the Marines? Why not the Air Force or Navy? Something safer?" I looked at my grandfather's photo on the mantel. "Because this is what I'm supposed to do." My father took the phone. His voice was gruff with emotion he couldn't quite express. "You call us the minute you can, understand? And Elena ... Your grandfather would be proud." That night, I packed everything I was allowed to bring into a single duffel bag. It seemed impossible that my entire life could fit into such a small space, but I'd learned from Grandpa that Marines traveled light. As I folded my few civilian clothes for storage, I found the small wooden box where I kept his dog tags. I held them in my palm, feeling their weight. Such small things to carry so much history. Without really deciding to, I slipped the chain over my neck and tucked the tags under my shirt. If small hands were going to make this journey, they'd carry a piece of Manuel Vasquez with them. The alarm clock buzzed at 4 a.m. on Friday morning. Outside my window, Phoenix was still dark, the desert holding onto the coolness of night for a few precious hours before the sun turned the city into an oven. I ate a breakfast I couldn't taste, double-checked my bag, and took one last look around the apartment that had been home at the bus station. I bought a cup of coffee I didn't want and found a seat in the corner where I could watch the other travelers. A businessman in a wrinkled suit checking his phone obsessively. A young mother trying to keep her toddler entertained with a coloring book. An elderly man reading a paperback novel with pages yellowed by age. Normal people living normal lives. In a few hours, I'd be on a plane to South Carolina, beginning a journey that would either transform me into something extraordinary or break me completely. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt oddly calmed. My phone buzzed with A text from Morrison. Remember, it's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Semper Fi. As the bus pulled up to take me to the airport, I touched my grandfather's dog tags through my shirt and whispered a promise I hoped I could keep. Don't worry, abuelo. These small hands are going to make you proud. The first part of my journey was over. The real test was about to begin. Paris Island hit me like a physical blow. The humidity wrapped around my body like a wet blanket, and the sounds drill instructors screaming, boots pounding on pavement. The constant undercurrent of barely controlled chaos assaulted my senses from the moment I stepped off the bus. Move. Move, move. Get on those yellow footprints. I scrambled with 47 other recruits onto painted marks on the ground, my duffel bag feeling heavier with each second. The drill instructor prowling in front of us looked like he could bench press a small car. His eyes swept over our ragged formation with the kind of disgust usually reserved for roadkill. Well, 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 what do we have here? His voice could have shattered glass. Looks like someone sent me a child by mistake. He stopped directly in front of me. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, but I could feel his presence like heat from a furnace. Recruit, what's your name? Elena Vasquez. Sir, Vasquez? Something shifted in his tone. Any relation to Manuel Vasquez? My grandfather, sir. The drill instructor gunnery Sergeant Williams. According to his name, tape leaned closer. I could smell his aftershave and the lingering aroma of coffee. Your grandfather was a Marines. Marine, recruit, but that don't mean squat here. You start from zero like everyone else. Yes, sir. But as he moved on, I caught something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Not kindness, drill instructors didn't do kindness, but perhaps a flicker of interest. The next 3 months were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and gradual transformation. Every morning at 0500, we'd stumble out of our squad bay for physical training. While my male counterparts struggled with pull-ups, I amazed everyone by cranking out 15 on my first try. The grip strength from years of rifle training had given my small hands surprising power. Damn, Vasquez, shouted Johnson, a farm kid from Iowa built like a refrigerator. Where'd you learn to do that? But it was on the rifle range where I truly came alive. The moment they placed an M16-4 in my hands, muscle memory took over. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. Breathe in, halfway out, hold. Squeeze the trigger like you're surprising it. The first qualification day, I shot expert, with a score that made the range instructor do a double take. Vasquez, you sure you haven't done this before? Every weekend for 8 years, sir. Word traveled fast. By the end of the week, recruits were asking me for shooting tips. Even the drill instructors began paying attention when I took my position. On the firing line, it was recruit Michaels who first made the comment that would follow me through the rest of my career. Look at those tiny hands, he whispered to his bunkmate during evening cleaning. Bet she can't even wrap them around a rifle properly. I pretended not to hear, but the words stung. Michaels was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. His hands were easily twice the size of mine, yet his shooting scores were consistently in the bottom quarter of our platoon. The comment reached Gunnery Sergeant Williams, who addressed it in his own special way during the next range session. Michaels, front and center. The big recruit jogged forward, confusion written across his face. You seem to have opinions about hand size and marksmanship. Care to enlighten the class? Michael's face went red. Sir, I didn't mean anything by IT, sir. Step up to the line, Vasquez, you two. We took positions at adjacent firing points. Williams walked behind us, his voice carrying across the range. Gentlemen and ladies, today we're going to learn about the difference between size and skill. Each shooter gets 5 rounds. Target is 300 meters. Best group wins. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about respect, about proving that my grandfather's legacy meant something. I settled into my shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against my shoulder. The buttstock fit perfectly into the pocket of my shoulder, and my hands found their natural grip. Small hands, maybe, but they knew this weapon like they knew their own heartbeat. Breathe, Mia. The rifle is just an extension of your will, Michaels. Fired first, his shots echoing across the range. I waited for the ceasefire command, then looked downrange through the spotting scope. His group was scattered across the target, respectable for a recruit, but nothing special. My turn. I controlled my breathing, let my heart rate settle, and squeezed the trigger with the kind of patience my grandfather had drilled into me since childhood. 5 shots, each one a conversation between me and the target. Cease fire. Range is clear. The range instructor examined both targets through binoculars, then walked back with an expression of disbelief. Michael's group, 8 inches, Vasquez's group. He paused for dramatic effect. 2.5 inches, at 300 meters. The silence that followed was broken only by the whisper of wind across the range. 2.5 inches was the kind of grouping that made experienced marksmen take notice. Williams nodded approvingly. Apparently, recruit Vasquez's tiny hands work just fine. Anyone else have comments about anatomy and marksmanship? No one spoke. After graduation from basic training, I was selected for advanced individual training as a rifleman with a specialty. Track towards Scout Sniper School. The real test was still ahead. The Scout Sniper Basic Course was held at Camp Lejeune. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Chun was waiting for us in the classroom. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself with the kind of confidence that made her seem 10 feet tall. Her reputation preceded her, one of the first women to complete the course, and now one of its most demanding instructors. "Welcome to Scout Sniper School," she began, her voice crisp and professional. "Over the next 8 weeks, we will push you beyond what you think is possible. 60% of you will not finish this course." Her eyes found mine in the group. "Some of you may think this course will be easier because you've been shooting since childhood. Some of you may think your prior experience gives you an advantage." She paused. "You're wrong. This course will strip away everything you think you know and rebuild you from the ground up." The physical demands were brutal. We crawled through swamps carrying 50-pound packs. We lay motionless for hours in camouflage positions while instructors tried to spot us. We practiced stalking exercises where the slightest movement meant failure, but it was the psychological pressure that nearly broke me. "Vasquez!" Instructor Staff Sergeant Rodriguez barked during our 3rd week. "What makes you think those baby hands can handle a precision rifle?" I was lying prone behind a Barrett M82A1, a .50 caliber rifle that weighed nearly 30 pounds. My hands did look comically small wrapped around the massive weapon, but my shooting position was textbook perfect. "Staff Sergeant, size doesn't determine capability. Prove I T1 shot, 800 meters moving target." The target was a silhouette pulled across the range on cables. I had one chance to make a shot that many experienced snipers would consider challenging under ideal conditions. The wind was gusting, the target was moving at an angle, and I had an audience of instructors and fellow students all waiting to see me fail. I settled behind the rifle, feeling its weight and balance. The Barrett was different from anything I'd shot before, more powerful, more complex, more demanding. But the fundamentals were the same. Feel the wind, Mia. Don't fight it, use it. I tracked the target through my scope, calculating lead time and wind drift. The crosshairs settled just ahead of the silhouette, and I squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure I'd learned as a child. The .50 caliber round exploded from the barrel with a concussion that rattled my teeth. 800 meters. Downrange, the target stopped moving. Target hit center mass. Came the call from the spotting station. Rodriguez walked over to examine my shooting position. He spent a long moment studying how my hands gripped the rifle, how my body was positioned behind the weapon. Your hands might be small, Vasquez, but they're steady. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd heard from him. Week 6 brought the ultimate test, a practical exercise that simulated real combat conditions. We were dropped into a forested training area with orders to complete a series of long-range shots while evading enemy forces played by other Marines. I was paired with Corporal James Thompson, a soft-spoken Marine from Montana who'd become my closest friend in the course. We'd been assigned what the instructors called Mission Impossible, a shot at 1,200 meters through dense forest, with multiple obstacles and a time limit of 4 hours. "This is insane," Thompson whispered as we studied the aerial photographs of our target area. "They want us to thread a needle through all those trees." The target was a steel plate barely larger than a dinner plate, positioned in a clearing that was only visible from one specific angle. Reaching that angle required navigating through thick underbrush, across a creek, and up a steep hill, all while carrying our equipment and avoiding detection. We moved through the forest like ghosts, using every stalking technique we'd learned. My small size proved to be an advantage here. I could slip through gaps in the vegetation that would have snagged larger Marines. After 3 hours of careful movement, we reached our planned firing position. Thompson set up as my spotter while I assembled the rifle system. But when I looked through the scope, my heart sank. "The shot's blocked," I whispered. "There's a branch directly in the line of fire." Thompson checked through his spotting scope. "You're right. We need to move about 50 meters to the left. No time. We've got 40 minutes left, and it'll take at least 30 to reposition." We lay there in silence, considering our options. Every other team had returned to base reporting failed missions. The instructors were expecting us to fail too. That's when I remembered something my grandfather had told me about his famous shot in Vietnam. "Sometimes, Mia, the impossible shot isn't about moving to a better position. It's about finding the opportunity that nobody else sees." I studied the branch blocking my shot. It was swaying slightly in the wind, not much, but enough to create brief windows when the line of fire was clear. "Thompson, I'm going to time the wind pattern. When I say send it, call the shot." "Elena, that's crazy. The window can't be more than a fraction of a second. My grandfather made a shot like this in Vietnam. If he could do it, so can I." I watched the branch through my scope, counting the rhythm of its movement. 5 seconds left, 3 seconds right, pause, then repeat. I had maybe half a second when the shot would be clear. My breathing slowed. My heart rate dropped. Everything my grandfather had taught me, everything the Marine Corps had drilled into me, came together in that moment. The branch swayed left. I put my finger on the trigger. It swayed right. I began my trigger press. It paused at the center of its arc. The shot was clear. "Send it," Thompson whispered. I broke the trigger. The rifle bucked against my shoulder. 1,200 meters away, steel rang like a bell. "Target hit," Thompson shouted, forgetting noise discipline in his excitement. We made it back to base with minutes to spare. The instructors were waiting for us, their expressions unreadable. "Vasquez, Thompson," Gunnery Sergeant Chun called out. "Report to the briefing room." We marched in expecting debriefing or criticism. Instead, we found the entire instructor staff waiting for us. "In 15 years of running this exercise," Chun began, "only 3 teams have successfully completed that shot. You're the first to do it under the prescribed time limit." She walked over to me, studying my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. "How did you know to time the branch movement?" "My grandfather taught me that every shot has a window of opportunity. Sometimes you have to wait for it to open." Chun nodded slowly. "Manuel Vasquez's granddaughter, indeed." She turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, this is what precision looks like. This is what patience achieves. And this is why we don't judge capability by hand size." Graduation day arrived with surprising speed. Of the 13 Marines who'd started the course, only 6 completed it. I finished second in the class rankings, behind only a Marine who'd been shooting competitively since he was 12. During the ceremony, Chun pulled me aside. "You know they're going to keep testing you, right? Every unit you join, every mission. You're assigned. Someone's going to look at those hands and wonder if you belong." "Yes, ma'am." "Good, because that doubt is going to make you better than Marines who never have to prove themselves." She handed me a small wooden box. "Your grandfather's commanding officer sent this. Said it belonged to the best sniper he ever served with." Inside the box was a scope ring from my grandfather's rifle in Vietnam, engraved with a simple message. "For Elena, may your hands be steady and your heart be true." 6 months later, I was deployed to Afghanistan with 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. The unit was skeptical at first, whispered conversations about the tiny sniper and whether she could handle combat stress. Those whispers stopped during our 3rd week in country. We were providing overwatch for a convoy that had been ambushed in a narrow valley. Enemy fighters were positioned on ridgelines 800 meters away, raining down fire on the trapped vehicles. The conventional wisdom was that the range was too great for effective suppression with standard infantry weapons. "Vasquez, can you reach them?" asked Captain Williams over the radio. I was already behind my rifle, studying the target area through my scope. The fighters were partially concealed behind rocks, presenting difficult shots even under ideal conditions. The wind was gusting unpredictably, and heat mirage was distorting my view. "Affirmative, sir. I count 4 targets. Take them." What followed was the most intense 2 minutes of my life. 4 shots, 4 targets, each one requiring split-second calculations of wind, distance, and target movement. My hands, those tiny hands that everyone doubted, remained rock-steady as I worked the bolt between shots. 4 enemies down. The convoy was free to move. "Outstanding shooting, Vasquez," came the call from the convoy commander. "How the hell did you make those shots?" I thought about my grandfather, about Gunnery Sergeant Chun, about every person who'd ever underestimated what small hands could accomplish. "Steady hands, sir. Steady hands and a patient heart." That engagement became the stuff of unit legend. Word spread through the battalion, then the regiment. Then across the Marine Corps, the story grew in the telling 4 impossible shots. 1 tiny sniper, precision that saved lives. But for me, the most important moment came 3 days later when I called my parents from the satellite phone. "Mia." 2 years later, I stood in front of a new class of scout sniper candidates as an instructor. Some were giants, some were average-sized, and one was a young woman who reminded me of myself, small, determined, and clearly fighting to prove she belonged. "Welcome to Scout Sniper School," I began, using the same words Chun had spoken to me. "Over the next 8 weeks, we will push you beyond what you think is possible." My eyes found the young woman in the group. She was sitting straighter than the others, her small hands folded precisely in her lap. "Some of you may think this course will be easier because you've been shooting since childhood. Some of you may think your physical characteristics determine your capabilities." I paused, thinking of all the instructors who'd tested me, all the Marines who doubted me, all the impossible shots that had become possible. "You're wrong. This course will teach you that precision beats power, patience beats pride, and steady hands come in all sizes." After class, the young woman approached me hesitantly. "Ma'am, I've heard stories about your service, about the impossible shots. Is it true?" I looked at her hands, small, delicate, but holding themselves with unmistakable steadiness. "What's your name, recruit?" "Sarah Kim, ma'am." "And I know what you're thinking, my hands are too small. I'm too young. I don't look like a sniper." I smiled, remembering a conversation in a Phoenix recruitment office that felt like a lifetime ago. "Recruit Kim, let me tell you something my grandfather taught me. It's not the size of the hands that matters. It's the steadiness of the heart behind them." I pulled out my grandfather's scope ring, now polished smooth by years of carrying it, as a reminder. The impossible shot isn't impossible because of the distance, or the conditions, or the target. It's impossible because people believe it can't be done. Your job is to prove them wrong, one precise shot at a time. As she walked away, I saw the same determination in her stride that I'd felt leaving that recruitment office years ago. The cycle would continue: doubt, testing, proof, and eventually, the recognition that steady hands come in all sizes. That night, I called my parents to tell them about the new student who reminded me of myself. My mother laughed when I described Sarah Kim's earnest determination. Just like you, Mia. Always trying to prove the world wrong about small hands. Not prove them wrong, Mama. Prove them irrelevant. Outside my window, Marines were conducting night training exercises, their movements precise and purposeful, in the darkness. Somewhere among them was probably another young Marine with small hands and big dreams, preparing for their own impossible shot. I touched my grandfather's dog tags, still worn after all these years, and whispered the same promise I'd made in that Phoenix cemetery. Don't worry, Abuelo. These small hands made you proud. The difference was, now I knew it was true. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.